He said freedom had a price, and Harriet Tubman was willing to pay for it. The night was silent, too silent. Somewhere in the deep woods of Maryland, a young woman pressed her ear to the earth, listening for the sound of horses, for the hiss of pursuit. Her heart pounded like thunder beneath the weight of her fear. She was running for her life. But in truth, she was running for the lives of many more. Harriet Tubman was born in Araminta, Ross around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, into a world that tried to convince her that she was property. She was small, fragile-looking, yet fierce. As a child, she labored under the blazing sun, dragging logs, checking traps, and holding water for the people who owned her. She saw her family broken apart, her sister sold, her mother weeping silently at night, and though she didn't have the words for it yet, something deep inside her whispered, "You were not born to bow." When she was a teenager, she was struck in the head by a heavy iron weight thrown by an overseer. It cracked her skull, left her with dizziness, visions, and fainting spells for the rest of her life. But Harriet didn't just lose consciousness that day. She gained clarity. She began to dream, dreams of freedom, dreams of deliverance, dreams she said came straight from God. Her body was broken, but her spirit, it became unbreakable. Freedom, the word burned in her chest like fire. When Harriet was about 27, she heard rumors that she was going to be sold. She knew what that meant, to be dragged away from her family, chained, perhaps never seen again. So one night in 1849, she made her choice. She waited for the darkness, for the world to go still. Then she whispered goodbye to her mother and slipped into the woods. "I had reasoned this out in my mind," she said later. "There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other." The journey was long. Nights were her cover. The North Star was her compass. She crossed rivers, hid in swamps, moved through woods so dark she could barely see her hands. Sometimes she hid in hay wagons. Sometimes she knocked on doors. Strangers who were part of the secret network known as the Underground Railroad. Every creak of a branch could have been death. Every dog's bark sent terror through her bones. But she kept moving. And when she finally crossed into Pennsylvania and the wind kissed her face as a free woman for the first time, she fell to her knees. She looked at her hands, trembling in disbelief. "When I found I had crossed that line," she said, "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything." She had escaped. She was not yet free, not until everyone she loved was too. Most people would have stayed away after that. They would have said, "Thank God I made it," and never looked back. But Harriet Tubman wasn't most people. Freedom was not something she could enjoy alone. She went back again and again and again. Each time she risked her life, and each time she returned with souls who had been enslaved. Families, friends, children, she led them through forests and rivers under the veil of night. If someone grew too weak or wanted to turn back, Harriet would raise her gun and say, "You'll be free or you will die." Because turning back meant capture, not just for one, but for all. They called her Moses, the woman who had led her people to freedom. And she never lost sight. She never lost a single passenger. She said God told her when to move and when to wait. When danger was near, she felt it in her spirit. Once, she fell asleep in the middle of a road when pursuers were close behind, and somehow the patrols passed right by her. Another time, she had a voice. She obeyed and discovered the path she was supposed to take had just been surrounded by bounty hunters. Freedom had a voice, and she listened. There were nights so cold that frost froze her fingers, nights so dark that she couldn't tell sky from river, and still she walked, would growl from hunger, her feet would bleed, and still she whispered, "Lord, I'm going to hold steady unto you." She had nothing, no maps, no weapons but her faith, no protection but her prayers, but faith, she said, was enough. "I always told God," she recalled, "I'm going to hold steady to you, and you've got to see me through." Through swamps, across bridges, past the edge of death, he did. Each time she led another group to freedom, she said she could still feel God's smile, and yet every freedom had its pain, and she saw the scars often carried. She saw families torn apart. She saw how injustice didn't vanish when chains did. But she also saw the power of courage and how one person's faith could become a light for hundreds lost in darkness. Harriet Tubman didn't stop when the Civil War began. She became a spy, a scout, and a nurse for the Union Army. She guided soldiers through swamps and hidden paths she knew by heart. She healed the wounded, prayed for the dying, and gave strength to those who had none left. When the war ended, she didn't fade away. She continued to fight, this time for the rights of women, the poor, and the forgotten. She lived to see slavery abolished, but her mission was never just about chains. It was about dignity, about believing that every human being deserved to stand tall and free. In her later years, she built a home for the elderly, cared for others even when she had little herself. Her body grew weak, but her spirit remained fierce. And when she was asked how she had done it all those rescues, all those risks, she simply said, "It wasn't me, it was the Lord. I always told him, I trust you. I don't know where to go or what to do, but I expect you to lead me." And he always did. Harriet Tubman's life is not just a chapter in history, it's a mirror that asks us, what are you doing with your freedom? What fear is still holding you captive? She was a woman who couldn't read or write, but she read the language of courage better than most of us ever will. She didn't have wealth or power or protection, but she had something greater, faith that refused to bow. And maybe that's the lesson. You don't need perfect circumstances to make a difference. You just need a heart that refuses to give up, no matter how dark the night becomes. Maybe you've been trapped by chains, not by chains, but by fear, by doubt, by your past. Maybe you've been told to stay where you are, to bow, to settle, to give up. But like Harriet Tubman, freedom begins with one brave step of faith. A step that says, I may not know the whole road ahead, but I'm trusting God. I'm trusting the God who walks beside me. Because somewhere in your journey, someone else's freedom might depend on your courage. And when history looks back, may it say of you that you too were a person who refused to bow.